Hello and welcome to 60 Seconds with Sergio. I am your host, Sergio Cabanas, attorney at law here in Florida. Thank you for joining me today. Today's question is, Sergio, my spouse and I are interested in having some type of legal separation. How do we go about doing that in the state of Florida? Well, in short, Florida recognizes where one has a legal marriage, and Florida law recognizes when one has a legal divorce. But what about this gray area in between? Well, Florida law doesn't really recognize what may be referred to in some places as a legal separation. Of course, from a practical standpoint, it is very common for married couples to end up separating before a divorce is ever finalized. For example, they may decide to sleep in separate beds or separate bedrooms. They may even decide to live apart completely. Often, they separate their marital assets and their marital debts, and they each go about living their own separate lives. Now, there are many reasons why couples choose to separate without getting a divorce. For example, they may want to stay married for religious reasons, immigration requirements, financial or medical reasons, or for their children, and the list goes on. If you find yourself in this situation, consider entering into what's called a postnuptial agreement. A postnuptial agreement is basically a contract between spouses that outlines the ownership of financial assets in the event of a divorce. It's kind of like a contract that stipulates who gets what during their separation. So, we can use a postnuptial agreement to acknowledge that the parties have agreed to, number one, a separation as of a certain firm date. Number two, it also delineates the separation of assets and debts as of that date. And number three, it establishes that any assets and debts or income that's generated thereafter will be considered separate and non-marital. This allows for the parties to acquire assets, debts, and incomes during their separation without worrying about the other spouse getting involved in these financial transactions, whether they wanted it or not. When one or both spouses decide to move forward with a divorce, the spouses have the ability to enforce the terms and conditions of the postnuptial agreement that already acknowledges a separation, as well as a separation of assets and debts. This allows for a quicker, easier, and less expensive divorce. I hope this short video provided you with some guidance over a commonly asked questions about these legal separations in the state of Florida. Of course, this is not a substitute for an actual consultation with an attorney who can review the specific circumstances of your case. Thank you again for joining me today, and as always, stay informed so you could stay strong.